Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
I got one for you. So, when I was 19, I moved into this house after a breakup, and I found this room on Facebook Marketplace. This girl was selling her room or whatever, subleasing it, and it was, I think, 250 a month. And I was like, yeah, let's go. So, I moved into this place, and it is a very old home. It was made out of local stone, and it was on this block that all the houses were made out of local stone. And if they weren't made out of local stone, they would not still be standing. I'll just say that. They're very old. So this house had been converted into separate apartments, and I was living in a room that you had to walk through a bathroom to get to, and this room is also connected to another bedroom, but we just put like furniture in front of it, so it kind of felt like a bedroom. So that's where I was staying. And the first night that I was sleeping there, I was woken up out of a dream, don't know what I was dreaming about, and I saw this woman just like hovering over me, looking at me. And I looked at her for a few seconds, and when she realized I was looking at her, I just saw her eyes get really wide, and she looked nervous, and she disappeared. And I've never really given that a lot of credit because I was waking up out of a dream. Sometimes you just see things. I don't know. But then the next day, when I was leaving to go do something else, I was opening my door, going through the bathroom to get out of the house. I swore that I saw someone like crouched in the corner of the shower. And I thought that was weird. But because the night before and how I was like, that was probably just a dream. I'm probably just paranoid right now. I'm not going to give it any credit. So time goes on, right? And I get a cat. Love the little thing. She's precious. And it gets to a point where, I'm 19. I'm full-time college student. Her food was more expensive than mine, and I couldn't afford to keep her anymore. So one of my friends took her, and I noticed as soon as she was gone that things started to get a little hairy. Like from that day forward till I moved out, every single day something happened. Didn't matter if it was daytime, nighttime, or anything. But that little figure that I had seen crouched in the shower was a little boy. And he was very upset that my cat was not there anymore. So what did he do? He terrorized me. Like, it got to the point where I had to rearrange my room so when I would wake up and roll over in the middle of the night, I wouldn't see him because he would stand in the corner where I had my cat's stuff as if like protesting that she was gone. And that was every single night from that point on. During the day, I would have hangers and clothes fly out of my closet. Did not matter. Door would open, closet and clothes would just fall out. And it became a normal thing, like I would see him and I wouldn't think twice about it because I didn't want to engage. I didn't want to encourage it. So what I would do is I wouldn't say anything. If he was really scaring me, I'd go to someone else's house. I just dip out because like child spirits, you don't really know if it's a real child or not. I think this was a real child because he was just throwing tantrums and taking it all out on me. The scariest thing that ever happened with him, though, was I was doing laundry one day. I guess my cat had probably been gone for a couple months now, and I'd become adjusted to seeing him. It wasn't anything new. And I was folding my laundry on my bed, and I watched him crawl out of my closet, look at me, and crawl underneath my bed. It actually makes me sick to my stomach, even thinking about it, because I don't know if you've seen any scary movie. It was horrifying. So yeah, I dipped. I didn't come back for like 2 days because that was horrifying. And before I left, though, I did get on my hands and knees and look under the bed to see if he was there. One of the bravest moments of my life, he wasn't. And at that point, I was already done. I didn't care that I didn't see him. I was done. So, I mean, my laundry was clean, it didn't matter. I dipped. And from that point on, it never got that bad again, but he was almost always in the shower when I would be leaving. And the way that our bathroom was set up, like the mirror faced the shower, and there would be times where like I would be getting ready. I'm crying. I would be getting ready and I would see his little stinking head pop up in the mirror. And I had to start sleeping with a face mask because I would roll over in the middle of the night and he would either be in the corner of my cat's stuff or he would be at the end of my bed or he'd be in another corner. Like it was something straight out of Insidious. And I'd say that's one of the worst ghost stories I have. At that house, definitely, because I never saw that woman again. There was one figure I kept seeing in the kitchen, but I never saw their face. They only stood with their back to me. So, I think our timelines were just crossing or something. But no one else in the house that lived there ever had any encounters that I know of. And yeah, so that's how I was terrorized by a little child, ghost, spirit, for having to get rid of a cat, for being poor, essentially. Hello, welcome to the clarity video for my ghost boy story, because there has been literally hundreds of questions, and understandably so. So we're gonna get the biggest one out of the way. Am I schizophrenic? No, sorry. If I was, everything would be a whole lot easier to explain and rationalize, but the truth of the reality is I'm not. I have no history of it. I have no history of hallucinations outside of sleep paralysis. And that is so common that it's just not worth looking into. So sorry to disappoint. I'm clinically sane, actually. Yeah, I do have a sixth sense, I guess. I have seen spirits my entire life, and a lot of the women in my family have. It's a very common trait among our family line, and a lot of us have shared experiences. Like, stereotypical story, I grew up in a haunted house. There was 5 separate spirits that I saw my entire life, and I have had shared experiences with my family, our friends, our neighbors, even. So it's not something I'm not used to, which is part of the reason I didn't move out after having such a scary interaction with that little demon child, whatever he was. Because, yeah, it was scary financially. It made sense for me to stay there, and it was not something that I hadn't heard of before. It wasn't something that I wasn't adjusted to. At that point in time in my spiritual journey, I wasn't able to set harsh boundaries with spirits, which is something I've learned over time. And so I just pretended to do what all the men in my family have done my whole life. See nothing, hear nothing. Did I see everything? Yeah, I did. I didn't record any of it. I'm so sorry I didn't. It just simply was not within my energy realm to bring out my camera and start recording stuff. Because it's also one of those things where I swear every time you try to get a video of something, nothing happens. And he was pretty devious, but he wasn't necessarily willing to put on a show for me. One of the biggest questions I've got is why I didn't interact with this thing. I'm not convinced it was a human spirit. I have seen ghosts, spirits my entire life, and the way that this one presented itself to me, I didn't trust it. He showed up as a full body apparition, head to toe, and it was almost like he had a blur filter on. I could see features, but I couldn't distinguish any details. The only thing I could really tell about him was he had 2 sunken holes for eyes. There was nothing there, no light, no glimmer, just dark holes in the middle of his head. And he was also fully grayscale, which I don't know if that was just the lighting he kept himself in or if that was real. But I never saw him with any specific colors on. And I guess he was probably between the ages of like 7 to 10. He was definitely like a little kid, but I don't have a kid. I don't know how big they get. I guess the best thing I could compare him to is the child jumping out of the cabinet in Insidious. It's cliche, but that's like, it's not a one-for-one, but that's the closest you're gonna get in regards to understanding what this thing looked like. Of course, literally that house in particular is the only home I've lived in where I have not had any shared experiences about spirits or anything. Every other house I've lived in, I can corroborate every single story. This one I can't, which is why I was like, oh, this will be perfect for this trend, because my roommates didn't even believe me. But I double checked with my roommates. None of them saw anything. They did all get weird vibes from the room that I stayed in, and that was kind of the central area for activity. So, I don't know. The girl who I rented the room from, haven't heard from her in literal years. So, you know, it's kind of fun that it's just a mystery, but I haven't looked into the history of the house. It's old as fuck, and my landlord was a douchebag, so he was gonna be worthless to talk to. I have so many more stories. If you're willing to hear them, let me know. I have hundreds. I can definitely say this wasn't the scariest experience I've had. It was up there, but that little kid, that was not a human. I'll tell you that much. So as time goes on, and you know, like retrospectively, I guess I do feel kind of bad for not setting up an altar or anything, or offering him anything, because I think it would have brought me peace of mind and maybe brought peace to the whole space. But you know, it is what it is. I was a kid. I was an idiot. In that point in my life, my spiritual journey, I had not learned how to set boundaries with spirits. And yeah, I just lived on and carried on because I didn't know what else to do. And yeah, I was poor, so yeah, anyway, thanks. Okay, so one time I had a first date that ended up in me being followed by whatever lived in this guy's house, and I had to do a seance in the middle of the night. Sorry if there's a lot of background noise. There's band practice going on at my house, so I'm like hanging out a window. But I've tried to tell this story probably 3 times now. Every single time I try to upload it, doesn't upload, goes straight to save to drafts. And then when I look in my drafts, there's so many added clips that are just black space. Like the first video I recorded, I think was 6 minutes, and then it was 17 minutes when I looked back at it in my drafts, and it was all mixed around, all the clips were messed up. So my boyfriend thinks that whatever I'm telling the story about does not want me to out it, but I got rid of it once, I can do it again. This story takes place about like 4 or 5 years ago, and I had this waiter who I thought was cute, so I left him my number, and things led to another, so we ended up going out for lunch one day. So after lunch, we go back to his house to hang out, and while we're there, we're partaking in activities such as, and who do I meet while I'm at his house? I meet this guy's dad. I meet this man's dad on the first date. Not only do I meet this guy's dad, I end up smoking with him too. I'm just gonna add that where these activities took place, everything we did was actually legal and recreational. So there's that. But so we get to talking, and this guy's dad asks me if I believe in ghosts, and I'm like, oh, guess what? Yes, I do, and I have hundreds of stories. He was like, well, don't really care to hear those right now. You should follow me. So what does my dumbass do? My dumbass goes, yes, sir. I follow this man I just met to the back of the home of this other man who I barely know. And they're trustworthy people. It's all fine, thankfully. But so he walks me up to a bedroom, and he says, go in there. I want you to tell me what it feels like. The amount of red flags at this point I was conscious of, but in my head I was like, I'm gonna do it for the story, all right? I'm gonna tell the girls about this one. So I go into this room, and it feels like I am 10 feet underwater. As soon as I cross the threshold, walking into this bedroom, I can see that there's a fan in there circulating just like that, but there's no movement at all. It feels stale, it feels crusty, I feel icky, I feel heavy, I feel ill, nothing good. I immediately start to like get clammy and claustrophobic, so I step out and I tell him, I'm like, what is that? And he goes, it's the attic. So I look, and yeah, matter of fact, there is like a latch up to the attic in that bedroom, and I'm like, why don't you like seal it? And he goes, no, it's not because the attic's in there, it's what's in the attic. He goes on to tell me that this bedroom was one that he was staying in, but he had to start sleeping on the couch permanently or set up another room in the other guy's bedroom because he could not sleep in there. He thought he was gonna die. He was having dreams of being choked. He was waking up suffocating. He would wake up to a tall figure standing over him, and he just got sick of it. So he dipped. And by dipped, I mean moved 10 feet out the room. He could only be in there for a couple minutes at a time, and I was in there for maybe 90 seconds, and I never wished to ever go back in that room again, and I never did. So the rest of the afternoon, we are just sitting outside talking about his encounters and like what's been going on, other things that we've both seen, and I just really cannot shake that icky feeling. Like, it just will not go away. And dinner time rolls around and I get out of there. All right, like, cool first date. I had a really good time hanging out with your dad. So I go home, carry on as usual, make dinner, whatever, go to bed. And still just feel gross, still feel claustrophobic in my own body, icky. I don't really remember what I ended up doing that evening, but I do remember having a very hard time falling asleep. As soon as I tried to fall asleep, it sounded like things started to move around the house, like objects or people or whatever, and I knew at that point, like, all my roommates were asleep. Like, I lived in a house with 5 different people, and there's always quiet hours, and it was quiet. So I try to ignore it because I just think it's one of my roommates moving about the house, like, whatever. And no, it doesn't cease, it doesn't go away, and it doesn't sound like anyone is outside of their room moving around. It doesn't sound like crashing from other rooms, and I kind of start to realize, oh, that's coming from my room. That's why I can't sleep. That's why I haven't shook this icky, gross-ass feeling, is because something is in here with me. So I just sit there and listen to it for a little bit, because I am just hoping that whatever it is goes away. Like, that house, everyone, all the roommates, we had stories there, but it was really persistent, and that just wasn't a normal occurrence there. So I sat up eventually. What the fuck did I see when I sat up? I saw like a 6 to 8 foot figure. I don't know, I was laying down just in my room. And when I say figure, I mean like a tall, dark shadow silhouette. No features, nothing. But I could see like the contour of its head turn to look at me, and that's when I knew, oh, I've been followed. Whatever this thing is attached itself to me because it knew I could sense it, and I don't know, maybe it just wanted to check out where I lived, but one way or another, the reason I couldn't shake that feeling is because I didn't shake it. It latched onto me. What I do next, I do not offer as professional advice. I did it because I didn't know what else to do, and I had just bought a bunch of these candles that I was like, oh, perfect, I'm gonna use these. So I got these candles, and they're called protector candles. They were called that based off of the herbs that they used to make them. Don't know what the herbs are. I got them from a store called Aquarius in Kansas City, and the only reason I picked them up was because they smelled like my grandma. And I was like, this is gonna be a great gift for my family. They smell like grandma. So shout out to Grandma Helen. She was looking out for me. So I just have a bunch of these candles. So I set like 5 up in a circle, and I light a stick of Palo Santo. And mind you, like, this thing is in the corner of the room this whole time I'm doing this, and I'm scared, but I am also hyper aware of the fact that, like, 9 times out of 10 you tell something to go away, it will. This one didn't want to leave, but I don't know, I was just feeling really bold. I've seen a lot of people comment that I'm white. I'm white. I'm so white that, like, I'm convinced I could get in a fist fight. I couldn't. I'm hyper aware of the fact that like I won't survive most natural disasters, but I'll put up a fight, why not? Anyway, so I set these candles up in a circle. I get a stick of Palo Santo, light the stick, I do a little cleansing myself. I very slowly move around the perimeters of my room. Bless my room. I make a statement saying like only positive energy in this room. Only my ancestors are able to come in here if they are acting as guidances. And that's not a real word. But so I just make these statements that like, if you are a negative spirit, you gotta go. I still hear stuff like shifting about my room periodically as I'm doing this. So I use that stick and I light all of those candles that are in a circle, and I sit in between all those candles in the circle. And for the next 30 minutes, I just sit there and say these chants over and over and over again. If you're a negative spirit, you cannot stay here. I know where you come from. You must go back home. You are not allowed to be attached to me. I do not permit you into my life. I do not permit you access into this space, access into this home. You are not allowed to disturb my roommates, blah, blah, blah. And I do that until I stop hearing things shift around the house. I didn't really know when I stopped, but I know I stopped when things settled down. And I just blew out all the candles. I said one final statement, and I took my ass to bed. Lo and behold, next day, nothing. I was able to sleep easy through the night, and I never saw that thing ever again. Never went back to that man's house ever again. And yeah, that's how I had to do a seance from a bad first date. It worked for me. But yeah. That was a tough first date. So that was one of my first dates. Love to know about yours. When I was 19, I moved into a house with 5 people and a dead lady and her dog. The house was bought by one of the roommates' parents, and so we all lived in it and paid rent to the parents. And it was a 10 out of 10 deal, affordable, close to my school, and it was awesome. So I moved in there, and it wasn't long before things started to get a little weird. And weird was like the supernatural part. I'd say one of my roommates was very odd. She was the scariest part of that entire experience living there, because she did not leave her room when anyone else was awake or out in the living areas. And if she did, she would only do it at night and walk around with a flashlight. I locked my door at night, okay? But after she moved out, things still stayed weird. So the dead lady who became our 6th roommate was the woman who died in that house before my roommate's parents had bought it up. And I'm 100% sure her dog died there too. All of us would see and hear this woman. Even the roommates who weren't super in tune with anything. And so there was one time, I'd probably been living at the house for, I want to say a year at this point. And I was in the living room with my roommate, middle of the day, and I said out loud, I was like, I've never been in the attic before. I think I want to check it out. Immediately, we heard a huge bang come from the attic. Never before had either of us seen that or heard that. Never again did we. Because guess what? I never went in the attic. That was a big no. The way that she mostly manifested was her feet, which sounds crazy, but you would see from her mid-calf to her feet, an apparition that would just fade as it went up, almost like a nightgown that just would fade into oblivion. You would see that in doorways, and specifically the doorway that you would walk through to get to all the bedrooms. And I cannot tell you how many times I was just walking through the house, turned off the kitchen light, went through the living room to go to my bedroom. And as I was looking up to go through that doorway, I would just walk through this woman's feet. You would see them and you'd walk through them, and it was like dust just evaporating. And I always felt really bad when I did that. So I always said, sorry, my bad, didn't see ya. We just treated her like another person in the house. She didn't bother us. I didn't bother her. There were times where I would come home after work or return from someone's house and my roommate would be in the kitchen and she would look at me and she'd go, "When did you leave?" And I'd be like, "I haven't been home all day." And she'd be like, "What do you mean? I heard you in your room talking to someone." No, you didn't. But so we figured out that that roommate was hearing this woman call someone's name over and over and over again. And the name that she was calling was the name of this deceased woman's sister, who is still alive, I'm fairly certain. But the roommate whose parents bought the house knew a little bit about this deceased roommate's history and her like family tree. And the name that we were hearing, I never heard it personally, but the name that was being heard was the sister's name. And she was calling out to her sister, and my roommate just thought it was me. It wasn't. My favorite part about living in that house was of the dog. We didn't have dogs in that house. We only had cats. And you would think, oh, cats, they ward off spirits. Bad spirits. Not all of them. There was so many times that my roommate would try to fight me. And I don't mean actually fight, but she would be mad at me because she thought I brought a dog into the house. Because I was the most likely to do that. Which is true. But I wasn't going to bring a dog into the house because I knew better. There was cats there, blah, blah, blah. But all of us, on the main floor, in the basement, we would hear a dog running in circles around the house. You could hear it panting. You could hear its feet on the floor. You could hear the jingle of its collar. All of us heard it multiple times in the night. So it was kind of sweet to know that our dead roommate and her dead dog were together. I thought that was actually very endearing and kind that they were still playing together and having fun. Especially when all of us roommates were together, because I'd say most of us had some sort of sixth sense in that home. Whenever all of us were in a room together hanging out, specifically one of the roommates' bedrooms, all of us would experience something. It didn't matter if we were in there for 15 minutes or 90 seconds. One of my roommates would see this woman walk by her room. One of my roommates would hear it. I would hear it. We've all seen these shadows walk by. There was one point in time where we were all sitting in the living room in that doorway where I always saw her feet. We all turned and saw just this woman's apparition standing there looking at us. And it never felt intimidating. It just felt like she was like, "What are you guys doing in my house?" That spirit was one that only one time truly scared the absolute fucking shit out of me. I don't know if I even feel comfortable telling that story online because it's a story I haven't even told the people I lived with at the time because they still live there and I don't want to ruin it for them. But that little dog, I think that little dog was one of my favorite ghost stories because that was so cute and all of us would hear it in tandem. And the next morning, we'd all be sitting around being like, "Did you let the dog in? I didn't let the dog in." Fingers were always pointed at me, but dogs deserve homes too, even the dead ones. And all dogs go to heaven, but some dogs stay to hang out with their dead owners.